All right, now that you know I'm a complete lunatic, let's talk for a few minutes. I want to talk about shop class, but before I do that, I do want to take a moment to embarrass two people in the audience, because 8 years ago at this event, I met someone who saved my life. I'm at high risk for breast and ovarian cancer, and at Zeev's event 8 years ago at the United Nations, I met the founder of Bright Pink, Lindsay Abner. And it changed my life, and it changed my family's life. And so the CEO of Bright Pink, an advocacy organization that helps young women at high risk of breast and ovarian cancer, Katie and Carly are in the audience, and I just have to say, please give them a big round of applause. I love you girls. All right, so I thought we could spend the next couple of minutes talking about some facts that weren't sitting well with me the last couple of years, and we'll string them together, and they tell kind of an interesting story. But before we do that, I was hoping you would play along and answer 3 questions for me. And since you're all seated very comfortably, instead of standing up and down, just raise your hand if the answer to this question for you is yes. So the first question is, how many of you have a friend or a family member who is a skilled tradesperson, a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter? Please raise your hands. That's actually a huge amount of people. I can't really see, but okay, that actually looks like 80% of the audience. How many of you are in the education field? Thank you. And how many of you have school-aged children? Lots. Okay, that was basically the entire audience. We'll come back to that. Okay. So, there's a huge skilled labor gap in this country. Let's talk about some interesting stats and figures and string them together into the story as we were observing it. So the first fact I wanted to share with you is that 1/3 of the firms that are thinking about doing construction-related projects have to delay those projects because they cannot find the labor. And this might resonate with you because if you've tried to put an addition on your home or your toilet has broken, you may have really had trouble getting a contractor or a plumber to come out and help you in your time of need. And in addition to that, we have 200,000 open skilled labor jobs in this country right now, a number that is growing at an unbelievable pace, will only get worse because guess what the average age of an electrician is in the United States? Good guess, it's 58 years old. The average age, that's not good. Average age of a plumber is 56 years old. And we don't have folks coming up behind and taking up these professions, and there are a couple reasons why that we'll talk about. So another fact that we were reflecting on is that there are about 200,000 people every year that separate from the armed forces, meaning they go from doing their service in the military into civilian life. And here are 2 more stats about those folks. The post 9/11 veterans, 45%, almost half, report being underemployed. So they may have a job for 20, 30 hours a week, but they want to have more employment and they can't find it, meaningful full-time employment. And out of all of the folks who are separating from the Army, which is the largest branch by number of soldiers, 30% file for unemployment. There is something wrong with this picture. So next, you're going to see maybe my wonderful grandfather. This is my Papa Bob. He passed away a few years ago, and he was very much the pillar of our family. Can you see a resemblance a little bit? I see one. Katie promised me she's going to take a picture because my grandmother, who's still alive, goes to Bridge all the time, and she always has to bring artifacts about what the grandparents or grandchildren are doing. That's like the social capital. So I write her a letter every week. Papa Bob. So my Papa Bob grew up during the Great Depression. He was an incredibly thoughtful and frugal man. He went during World War II and fought with the Navy, and he was stationed in China in the Yangtze River. And when he came home, he had the opportunity to do something that no one had ever done in his family history before. He studied at university on the GI Bill. He achieved a degree in mathematics, both a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin. I don't know if we have any Badgers in here. Got a couple of Badgers. Okay, perfect. So what that did, and we were all so proud of him, he had almost a 40-year career with IBM. Interestingly, took him back to China as a business person later in his career. But Papa Bob's experience really set the standard for my family. It was now the standard that we would go to 4-year school, and that was the standard he set for his children and his children's children, which largely feels like a great thing, except, did you know, and this number now is old, if you saw yesterday, we now have $1.5 trillion of student loan debt in this country. That's a mind-blowing number, and it's 2.5 times what it was 10 years ago. But here is the statistic that is truly heartbreaking that I could not get over when I started thinking about this work and this space. Over 30% of the students who begin 2-year or 4-year education, most of which take on big student loan debt, drop out of school before they have a degree. And they have nothing to show for it in terms of earning potential. And this debt, as many of you know, is unforgivable. So even if you file for bankruptcy, you cannot shake this debt. You will carry it with you the rest of your life. So a couple of other things that we were observing. I went to high school in the 90s, and I had shop class. I loved shop class. I loved to make things with my hands. And we know now there's this maker movement, and this is actually becoming cool again in some ways. In the 90s, we were getting excited about math and science, which is a great thing for our country. But in public education, typically, there's only so much money to go around. So to fund STEM and STEAM programs, which are great, we had to get the money from somewhere. And this is publicly available data, and you will see we defunded technical education in public schools. So we shut down on-ramps to these types of professions while we raise the standard that everyone needs to go to a 2-year or 4-year college. And then another interesting stat in the hallways, I think we're talking a lot about this here, future of work and automation of jobs. There are some jobs that are repeatable that may be replaced or be transformed by automation and AI in the near future. And this makes sense, but it's interesting to point out that the types of jobs we're talking about, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, contractors, et cetera, are physical jobs and they're not particularly repeatable. So you can't imagine a toilet being fixed by a robot, right, anytime soon, because you gotta troubleshoot the whole thing and everyone is unique. So these are durable jobs. There are jobs in every community in America, and a lot of them pay really well and would help avoid all of the student loan debt that so many folks are taking on. So why do I share all this with you? Well, 3 years ago, when I joined my organization, I started going to our stores. We love to work in the stores. I love to put on my apron. It's always in my suitcase, so if we need to go work in a store, I got my apron at the concierge right now. We go into the stores, and I would walk our aisles, and I would observe all these wonderful people coming in. They're our most frequent customers, and we know them all by name. And yet we weren't doing anything to support their profession, to support the prestige of their profession, and to encourage people to come up and take up those professions. And many of them actually have a huge amount of trouble finding skilled labor to complete the jobs. Their growth is limited by the fact they can't find enough people to hire. So we were reflecting on this, and I started just having conversations with people to ask, what do you think about this? Could we do something about this? Gosh, I wish we could do something about this. And I woke up one morning 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, and the country was in this really interesting place, and I was feeling defeated. And then I kind of thought, what's wrong with me? I work for a $100 billion company, and we can do something about this. I mean, we should figure out a way to put a stake in the ground and to figure out the system, to think about how we would make change on a scale that matters. So I tin-cupped around, and luckily, in part of my organization, I have our 501c3 nonprofit foundation, the Home Depot Foundation. So we looked at our numbers, and we tried to figure out how to make a long-term commitment to putting more skilled labor into the US economy. And we kind of shook all the couch cushions upside down, and we found $50 million. So a couple weeks ago, we put a stake in the ground. We threw our wallet in the road. We committed $50 million to putting 20,000 skilled tradespeople into the US economy over the next couple of years. This is a photo actually from the day we announced. You probably can't tell that's actually me. But we were on Fort Stewart, which is in Georgia. So we have 2 programs going right now, one at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, one at Fort Stewart. We're starting with our military. And we go to bases, we're having a lot of conversations now to scale this across the United States and across the branches. And we will be standing up shop class so they can sort of speed date in a 12-week pre-apprenticeship program, see if they like the profession and go into those trades. We'll also be standing up programs for veterans and in high schools across this country. So in closing, there are many of you in the hallways that I've been talking to who are doing work in this space, and it's going to take an army of people to reframe the narrative around these jobs, to change the mental model in our country. But by the number of hands that I saw you raise earlier, it's all within our power to ask questions. Your next student-teacher conference, or you run into the superintendent of schools or the mayor, ask them, what are we doing to bring shop class back? Thank you.